Let's jump into the immediate thematic of today's review, Deadlands, the Weird West. I was told we would be exploring an apocalyptic wasteland with Holler. I thought it was going to be Ripper, the undead sort of setting there. I mean, death is around every corner. But war is an inevitable fact of life, and we should be ready for it with Weird Wars, I do say. But life on the high seas is always worthy. 50 Fathoms, for example, is something we should be talking about today. Hey, Hey, can I ask a simple question? Who the hell are all of you?
We're you, but savage.
Right, I was gonna do Savage Worlds review. Okay, let's get into this. Savage Worlds is one system, but with a few dozen settings, ranging from the famous Deadlands to the upcoming Pathfinder to Space 1889, or even variations of them too, because Deadlands has like 4 different subsettings. All of them use the same dice and card system, a very simple evolving dice system, other than Deadlands Classics, which essentially uses a D20 system. Now, I could talk about the various different settings, but getting your hands on the books is surprisingly difficult because there's just so many of them. I recommend getting the books directly from Pinnacle Entertainment Group's website. Now, what's an evolving dice system? It's essentially skills start with the smallest die type, the D4, and you start working your way up, in most cases as high as a D12, but some go as high as the D20. The core rulebook has chapters saying all the things you'll need, which a lot of games don't have. I normally have to hunt to figure out what sort of dice I actually use. This one, it says you're going to need various dice from D4 to D20, a 54 card deck, the core book, you might need the setting book, and something to represent their version of hero points, which they call bennies. And you might need miniatures if your group wants to do that, but that's marked as optional. Let's take a look at how the game actually functions. First, you start out with your concepts. What's the world? What's it like? Who's in it? Yada yada, blah blah. You can do that with your characters too, because you gotta figure out, hey, am I a gunslinger from the Old West, or maybe just some teacher who's just happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or right place, right time, however you want to look at it. You can also figure out your race with that as well. Now, there's actually a full chapter, well, technically 2 chapters in the core book, just on creating your own race. It's got some examples, like, your normal fantasy stuff, dwarf, elf, human, and all that, but then it's got android and a lizard man and bird man and fish man and all that. Once that's done, you pick out your hindrances. You do need to take at least 1, but you need to have at most equivalent of 4 points worth. You can take more, but you only get at most 4 points. These points can be used to get different items or abilities as well. These hindrances basically are ways to hurt your character, flaws, for example. But they really are worth taking as they flesh out your character quite a bit. Now then you'll pick out your traits, which are your attributes, your skills, and other such things. Everything starts with a D4, and as you put points into it, it goes up into higher dice sizes. You've got agility, smart, spirit, strength, and vigor as your attributes for Savage Worlds, at least in the core system. Other settings might have more. but I'm not going to go into any of them because based off the name, you can probably figure out what exactly they do and are. Then we go into skills, which there's some cores, I think about 5 or 6 of them, and more in each setting as well, and each of those also kind of delve into subtypes as well. You spend points to buy opening the skill or to increase the die size. Then you've got your statistics, which are your basic size, speed, parry, and toughness? I don't really know all that well how these all work, but I think I get the basics of it. Parry is your defensive die roll, size adds or subtracts from certain things, pace is your speed, which should be fairly obvious, and toughness, I think, is essentially your HP. If I'm getting that all right. I could be very wrong. Now you get your edges, which are basically your feats. You can do special things or have special connections. You can get as many as you can afford. There's no limit to them. And your continuing character, your advancement, as I think the book calls it, you can get more edges, or you can upgrade dice, or you can buy new skills, yada yada blah blah. Then there's gear, which there's actually a little chapter for in this, and it recommends starting characters out with $500 worth of gear, but I imagine different settings probably call money different things, but either way, your game master will decide if that's how he wants to go with. Now, all Savage World settings use these rules, with minor variations in between. Like the post-apocalyptic will use radiation, while Superhero Guide will use, well, superpowers. It's great as you can stick with one setting, or perhaps play an RPG version of HeroScape where you're from different times and worlds fighting for the goal of going home. I love this sort of thing, and wish more games would do it. Sure, D&D has multiple worlds, but let's be honest, their variation isn't all that great. Eberron is the most unique, and not really. Let's talk about the poker system of this game. Bennies, which are kind of like hero points from Pathfinder, or inspiration, I guess, from Dungeons & Dragons. You can get them for doing certain things. 2 recommended points on how to be handed them are for being clever in roleplay, or when someone at your table draws a joker during combat. Drawing cards is basically your initiative rolls. When you draw the joker, everybody gets a Benny. The Game Master also can get them too, but there's only one way for villains to get them, and that's for drawing a joker. What are they used for? A few options. More depending on edges and GM's allowance, but here's what the book says you can do at base. You can reroll trait rolls. Essentially, if you fail, you can reroll the die and try and win. You can recover from shaken, which essentially lets you shake off certain conditions. Soak rolls, letting you ignore damage, and draw a new action card or card from the deck, which, like I said, is basically re-rolling initiative there. Now, the core book has really all you need to start a game. It has a short section on enemies, a section on building races and characters, section on equipment, and various other things. The core book is pretty setting neutral, so you could make your own with it. Perhaps something like Time Splitters, or even a Roman sort of game where you're fighting gods? What about a Call of Cthulhu sort of thing? The options are literally endless and limitless with the Savage World system. Unfortunately, because of how the Savage Worlds work, I can't really criticize much. There are a few things, though, like, Why is there so much, and why don't you expand on what's already there? The website puts out that there's a ton of settings, but like I said earlier, there's at least 4 for Deadlands. Deadlands, Lost Colony, Noir, Hell on Earth, and Classic, so 5. And apparently all of these use the reloaded system, and none of them are the same setting, and I don't even know what reloaded means. Same world, but not the same setting. Hell, Deadlands is literally it's the only one with a player's guide in it, and that's the 6th gun looks like it's another setting entirely. I don't... And then they just don't expand on most of them, like I said. Weird Wars and the Goops or Groups or whatever the hell it's called. And then some of these just won't work well together. For example, I don't think Flash Gordon is going to work well with the Fantasy Lonkmar. Noir might not work well with The Last Parsec. Necessary Evil sure as hell ain't working with The Goon. And, various other combinations there. But this is my time to give a score. Because there's a lot for me to score, but somehow nothing and all, I'm gonna give this a high score of 90%. It's extremely customizable, and I admit I love the evolving dice system. Games that have those systems have a soft place in my heart, I'll admit. But it's also got a ton of things which you won't even look at or learn about. It is both very easy and very complex. It's possible to mix and match, but you need to be extremely careful with what you do. But that's all I've got for today. I need to deal with my escaped clones now, so shove off.